Okay, hello. Yeah, today focusing on this topic of Sharia law and is that compatible with the United States Constitution? Okay, and this got started by putting up a post from InfoWars where these Muslim women who attended a Muslim Day in Texas that was sponsored by CARE, in which CARE is the Center for American Islamic Relations. And they were speaking with journalist from InfoWars, Owen Troyer, and he was asking them if they knew that CARE has been connected by FBI documents to the terrorist group Hamas. And so my underlying point is that politics, as we know, divides us, right? And it ensures that there is still a ruling class and a slave peasant class that worships this ruling class, whether they're progressives on the left who are advocating Sharia law, as we saw there was a woman that started the Women's March on Washington, supports Sharia law and has been said to support ISIS by putting a one finger up salute that they use. And of course, Hillary's girlfriend, this Huma Abedin, there's this cabal of banksters and Satanists that run all these nations. So that's why I'm against using regulation, even though I'm for the decriminalization of cannabis, for example. But that's because it's God's business, and none of this idea that there should be this union government that like forces what I think on you, or forces U.S. tax dollars to pay for abortions. That's not appropriate. Well, so Rebecca Stone, a friend of mine, she was like, "Well, it's not my understanding that uh, Sharia law contradicts the U.S. Constitution, or that the parts of it that allow the beating of women, stoning them to death for adultery, would be coming over here to America." And then later on, she says, "Well, if you can find an example that that version of Sharia law is being upheld by the U.S. courts, you tell me." And I was familiar with that and knew there was stuff out there about that. But I ended up finding a different topic to support that claim, and I found it very interesting. And it has to do with the banker bailout. You remember in 07, 08 when all the securitized debt was bailed out, uh, forced upon us by the U.S. federal government, just as Obamacare was forced upon us. And what happened is that the government took over AIG, right, which they are the leader in the securitized debt financial system that has to do with how in the 80s they broke down the regulation between the investment part of a bank and the deposit holder part of the bank, so that if you just had money there, they could advertise to you to invest and all that, which is how people ended up with the securitized debt. And of course, the Federal Reserve System is this Freemasonic Rothschild Zionist concept of Jewish interest based debt, right? And I don't know if you know this, but the Arabs forbid that a long time ago, and they only allow a set fee when you borrow money. Like if you borrow $1,000, I'm going to charge you a 10% fee one time that doesn't multiply. So this is how I'm showing you it's valuable that there are these different groups of Jews and Muslims, but when this United Nations, or the Trump, you know, neoconservative or whatever, anybody that comes in and tries to act like the hero that they're going to solve this problem of these different groups without them solving it through their personal actions, that's an abomination to God. Okay? Because you're saying that, well, I have to have uh, this human government to solve these problems. So, specifically, uh, this Thomas More Law Center here is bringing up the fact that AIG invested its money based on this Sharia law concept, right? So, in the same reason I'm calling this out, I'm calling out the fact that it's totally wrong that churches receive a tax-free status. That is inappropriate. They should, because they have to become a corporate entity in order to receive that status, and therefore they've invalidated their relationship with Jesus Christ, which is not based on any legal agreement. That was the time of the Jews and before, of laws and the pagans of doing magical spells to cause change in the flesh. So that's why we live today with the dead corporations. The will of what people wrote down is lording over us, right? That's religion. So when these progressives try to vote for all this stuff, that they're going to the devil, the person that hates freedom, in order to gain freedom. So let's look specifically here. Thompson continued, this astonishing decision. Who is Thompson? Thompson is, let's see, there's a Judge Lawrence P. Zatkoff, a federal district court judge in Michigan, dismissed a constitutional challenge to the U.S. government's bailout of AIG, which used over $100 million in federal tax money to support Islamic religious indoctrination through the funding and promotion of Sharia-compliant financing, SCF. Okay. And let's see what that entails here. Richard Thompson, who's president and chief counsel of the Thomas More Law Center, commented that this ruling allows for oil-rich Muslim countries to plant the flag of Islam on American soil. They call Sharia-compliant financing an ethical product, a new way of life. Okay. He continued, the astonishing decision allows the federal government, as well as AIG and other Wall Street bankers, to explicitly promote Shia law, the 1,200-year-old body of Islamic canon law based on the Quran, which demands the destruction of Western civilization in the United States. The same law championed by Osama bin Laden and the Taliban and prompted the 9/11 Islamic terrorist attacks, responsible for the murder of thousands of Christians throughout the world. And of course, Christians are just as flawed for supporting any kind of war. That's all this war in the Middle East. So neocons suck. $70 billion in taxpayer money in that emergency bailout. Let's see. Sorry, I didn't read over this better ahead of time to get clear. So that's the problem here, is that we're so deep into unconstitutional behavior that we can't even imagine what that world would be like and was like. So anybody talking about law and order is just not aware of how far off the track we are. Yeah, so that's about all I can pull from this document right now. But ultimately, I think that we're going to have to represent our different groups in a true unity. And we're going to have to compete with the United Nations, who's offering this false world peace. And if we don't, there's going to be civil war and we're going to be screwed. So, what's your suggestion of how Muslims and Christians and humanists, can support each other? I think that Christians should figure out how to support the Mother Nature stewardship of the land thing without the United Nations lie about global warming and carbon taxes. What's